Greetings, everyone. My name is Heather Sabin. I'm tourism coordinator at Monona Terrace and coordinator of the Wright Design Series. We're so pleased that you're joining us for tonight's talk. We thank you for attending, whether you're a regular of this series or maybe you're joining us for the first time, in which case, welcome. Those who have viewed this lecture before know that we do typically have a primary focus on architecture. However, Frank Lloyd Wright was a designer in many disciplines, including the areas of fashion and textiles, which will be featured this evening. In fact, this presentation is kicking off a month of programs at Monona Terrace that celebrate fashion and textiles. So sprinkled throughout April, we will have a t-shirt upcycle workshop, a trash to fashion design event, and believe it or not, a Frank Lloyd Wright themed runway show that is presented by UW-Madison's student organization, The Vault. If you're in the Madison area, we do hope that you'll come and check out these events. Please go to the community events section of our website, mononaterrace.com. So a few things about the webinar itself. Our speaker tonight has graciously agreed to take some questions following her presentation. And we'd like for you to use the Q&A feature of the webinar to put those questions in. We do try to get to as many as we can that time will allow. We also are recording this, and so we will post this up on our website following tonight's lecture. I want to thank the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation for sponsoring our talk tonight, the rest of our April programming too, in fact. And with that, I'm going to introduce to you Emily Butler, who is the Vice President of Partnerships at the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation. Thanks for being here, Emily.
Absolutely. Thank you, Heather. And I have the wonderful honor tonight to introduce our speaker. So tonight we have Leigh Wishner. Leigh is a design historian specializing in modern textiles, fashion, and interiors. She has worked in the antiques and museum field for the past 25 years, holding positions at the FIDM Museum, at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, the Los Angeles County Museum of Arts, and at Cora Ginsberg LLC. Leigh received her BA in art history and archaeology from Barnard College and her MA in decorative arts and material culture, from Bard Graduate Center. Her passion for the entwined subjects of the 20th century fabrics, apparel, and furnishings is shared extensively through lectures, essays, social media, and her vintage business, Totally Textiles. In 2023, she contributed to the multi-award winning A Dark, A Light, A Bright, The Designs of Dorothy Liebes, the first major publication devoted to the pioneering American weaver. Always exploring topics connecting textile artists and with industry, Leigh is currently writing a book on Dee Dee and Leslie Tillett, Wedded Mavericks of Mid-Century Textile Design and Fabric Creation. She is also working on Pattern Play USA, Adventures in 20th Century Textile Design, a book celebrating the diversity and impact of fabrics designed and produced in America. And with that, I will hand the reins over to Leigh for our wonderful presentation tonight. Thank you, Leigh.
Well, thank you so much, Emily and Heather. It's really a pleasure to have been invited, and thank you to everybody who's joining us tonight. I think you're in for a real treat. So, people don't connect me with the dress world, but from where I sit, art and textiles is art with a capital A, whether it's for dresses or home furnishings. This was a very surprising late career lament from Dorothy Liebes, who was very much defined by her interior design work, but very often sidelined from discussions of mid-20th century fashion. But directly or indirectly, Liebes worked in fashion over her entire career and had a real zest for the art and commerce of it all. She was a respected fashion authority in her own time, maintaining high-profile consulting relationships with major American garment manufacturers and suppliers, fiber suppliers. The first time Liebes is mentioned in Women's Wear Daily, for example, was in 1938 and reveals the duality of her role in the fabric design field. Shortly before the Golden Gate International Exposition opening, she was approvingly described as a rising talent whose, quote, reputation is associated with textiles she creates for home furnishings, and who had the chic of a woman whose chief interest might be women's fashions. One had this impression yesterday as she appeared in a black frock, a background for the magenta hat, and huge handbag made from that looped weave of spun silk, which is Miss Liebes's own design, transported from home furnishings to millinery by Lily Dashay. And as you can see from this slide, the comparisons to another genius of fashion, Schiaparelli, Elsa Schiaparelli, were very quick. And it's no wonder that people wanted to wear all of her luscious materials. This is actually an homage that she created to Schiaparelli for the Golden Gate Exposition. And you'll also be seeing a few photos here and there from the installation at the Cooper Hewitt Museum from 2023. So despite the fact that she was occasionally dismissive of the fashion business, she was creatively engaged with it from the beginning, as I said, and keen to work there. Her name first appeared in Vogue and Harper's Bazaar in the late 1930s, but at first only mentioned in context of her interior design for high-end clients. Women's Wear Daily, they definitely speculated that her upholstery could be tempting for the imaginative designer to make all sorts of accessories like evening wraps, handbags, and hats. And really the multiplicity of possible end uses for Liebes's textiles is a hallmark of her practice. And it definitely got people in the fashion cliques to notice. As she gained popularity for her interior furnishings, she also started receiving awards for her fashionable forays. In 1937, Liebes received an award from Lord & Taylor, and in 1938, Neiman Marcus gave one of its first annual fashion awards to her. Lord & Taylor was one of the first department stores to present her unique hand-knit cardigans with evening clutches to match, incorporating what they called sumptuous Liebes fabrics revered by decorators in rich jeweled colors such as cerise, yellow, and blue, some of the bright and bold tones she was known for. So by the early 1940s, Liebes was gaining recognition for her dress weight fabrics for women's attire and accessories. She was absolutely fearless and noted for incorporating a range of really unusual materials for the time, such as brocaded ribbons, chenille, clusters of sequins that she would have on a strip, strips of metal, glass beads, artificial flowers. All of these things made their way into her fabrics, even Christmas lights for one interior design project. Although the outbreak of World War II, temporarily limited her access to certain materials, she really forged ahead and made a lot of strides with synthetic materials as well. Turban-style hats and purses were offered by milliners like Lily Dashay, Sally Victor, and John Fredericks, who was known as Mr. John, and he actually became quite a close friend of hers and made all of her hats. And these items were retailed in all of the chicest places: Henry Bendel's, Saks Fifth Avenue, Lord & Taylor. And from the 1930s and well into the 60s, her specialty fabrics started to entice Hollywood designers and people in sort of the jet set. Although she was never credited on screen, several productions used her exquisitely textured, glimmering textiles for set decor. And the photo of Dorothy L'Amour on the left, published in the movie magazine Photoplay in March 1938, it really very simply demonstrates the dramatic visual potential of Liebes's fabrics with loops, ribs, and often shot through with metallic wefts. Once you're steeped in sort of the what to look for of what makes the Liebes look, you start to see how pervasive her work was actually in set decorations in Hollywood. Here's actually just a small sampling of some of the films featuring her work. Adam's Rib is actually the only production we have correspondence that links her directly to the stage set. But all the other productions just take a trained eye and I guess a love of Turner Classic Movies is what I found out. It seems that in these films, one of the quickest way to get to a modernist decor was to include some of her designs. And the most popular way to do that often was with these incredible structural adjuncts that she called them structural adjuncts sometimes, but they're room dividers or screens. And so you'll see them in these stills, and they could be very tone on tone. They could be very brightly colored, but they usually had bamboo slats woven in. And then the homes of Hollywood stars and bigwigs were also dressed in the Liebes look, primarily thanks to interior designers, such as Frances Elkins and the former Hollywood actor turned decorator, William Billy Haynes. And their clientele were largely associated with people in the motion picture industry and stars. And you'll see on the left is Jack Warner's home with a dramatically fringed chevron striped curtain and also a very nubby upholstery material on the couch. And then on the right is Edward G. Robinson's home, and his private art gallery was furnished with cyclamen pink upholstery material as well as some of the curtains inside of the private gallery. So in addition to Billy Haynes and Frances Elkins, Liebes developed close friendships with many of the top architects and interior designers of her day. Timothy Pfluger of San Francisco, Samuel Marks of Chicago, and William Paulman of New York are just a few of the more recognizable names. But I know that we're all here for this. There's no other collaborator who had a higher profile of hers than Frank Lloyd Wright. It was actually Pfluger that brought Wright to her studio sometime around 1935. And in her fashion, as she writes in her unpublished memoir, she was convinced that Wright would absolutely hate the vivid colors and the extensive use of metal in her fabrics. And so when she knew he was visiting, she waited it out at the hotel across the street from her studio. But pretty soon, a Liebes employee phoned her, exclaiming, "You better come down here at once. He's ordering everything in the place." And I think that you can really see why her fears were misplaced. You'll see that she is known for very bold, bright color combinations and colors that maybe Wright would never have gone with. But her use of metal in her textiles, and particularly the color copper, the copper color, really captivated Wright. And with his recognition, the orders just began to flood into her small studio space. And she actually had to acquire more looms and a bigger space to keep up with the increased demand just from Wright. and also from the national attention that she was getting because of these commissions. These are actually some really exquisite samples in the Cooper Hewitt collection that really show the different kinds of effects that she could achieve with these metal strands that would run through. Often they were lurex, and I'll get to that. Wright selected Liebes textiles for a number of his interiors, including a beach house for Della Walker in Carmel, California, known as the Mrs. Clinton Walker House. This space had reed blinds and pillows designed by Liebes. And the loosely arranged reeds that are bound with the cream colored and gold thread warps that keep it all together are just enough to let light kind of shimmer through in dappled ways and hit the Liebes pillows that are lining the couch, which are also all laced with some very subtle tone-on-tone glitter, metal threads. They also collaborated in 1950 when Liebes designed drapery and upholstery fabrics for the Frida and Henry J. Neal's residence in Minneapolis. And both of these commissions highlight one of the shared principles that brought both of these two genius minds together, that consideration of natural light within constructed built environments. Obviously a chief concern for Wright, but equally paramount for Liebes. So Liebes made her first trip to Taliesin East around 1938, and the following year she studied architecture there and also taught weaving and textile design at Taliesin West in Scottsdale, Arizona, and made custom textiles for the space as well. And I'm very grateful to the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation for preserving some of the images in their own archive. She also continued to supply Taliesin West associates with representative weaving samples after Wright's death. She developed a very close friendship with Wright's wife, Olga Vanna. And in 1946, when Olga Vanna's daughter Svetlana was killed in a car crash, Wright requested that Liebes get a loom and fly out to distract his wife by teaching her to weave. And Liebes often considered her craft a form of therapy and willingly obliged Wright's request, packing up a small loom, which you saw some snapshots of that a few minutes ago, and a lot of yarn. And she hoped that she would help her friend soothe her sorrows. And Olga Vanna really cherished her friend Dorothy, writing how disappointed she was that she couldn't see her as often as she wanted, and often even sending her gifts, such as Olga Vanna made her some button bracelets for her to complement her lively attire that she was known for. So Liebes's personal style, like with the idea of wearing button bracelets, things that her friends knew she liked, Liebes, she loved simple jewelry, but she also loved some pizzazz as well. This is actually a piece that was in her collection by a Mexican silversmith named Mathilde Poulat. And then the bracelets that she was best known for were actually these 6-inch wide gold cuff bangles that were designed by her friend Helen Hughes Delaney. They were very much her signature. And we'll get more back on track with her personal style later. And I just want to advance onwards through the march of fashion here. So as with Frank Lloyd Wright, her closeness to Adrian Adolph Greenberg, known professionally as Gilbert Adrian, stemmed from their shared flair and wit. He was actually the first prominent designer to use Liebes's fabrics. He was a very famous costume designer. And so he had a sense of the theatrical. And so her unorthodox choices of materials like Chinese ribbons was what attracted Adrian at first, who actually left his position as the head costume designer for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in 1941 to launch his own ready-to-wear and custom fashion line. And Liebes became very close friends with the designer and his wife, the film star Janet Gaynor. He invited Liebes to design an opulent backdrop for his Beverly Hills Salon's theatrical catwalk stage. They decided on this incredibly subtle but dramatic pale gray and cognac leather strips that are interlaced with metallic gold threads and almost like a rough twine-like thread that gives a real good example of Liebes's interplay of textures. And the panel is actually still in the one of the panels is in the Museum of Arts and Design in New York. She made sure that her salon furnishings and custom fabrics for Adrian introduced her to Hollywood's elite. And proof is definitely in the Harper's Bazaar editorial depicting actress Lauren Bacall and model Slim Hawkes, the wife of film director Howard Hawks, dressed in Adrian and Liebes. The top coat Bacall wears is described as woven of ribbon, silver thread, green and fuchsia, pink wool in all a wonderful, elegant profusion. And Hawks is actually shown in a suit jacket of white wool with shining gold woven into the plaid. Several Adrian jackets inset with horizontal bands of Liebes twills and gleaming with metal strands popped up in the press at that time. And Liebes herself was photographed wearing such a jacket, and with one of her weavings draped over her shoulder. And personal receipts and photographs also confirm that she wore Adrian. This is one of my finds. As I sifted through the Dorothy Liebes papers, which have been digitized by the Smithsonian, I have an eye for pattern. I noticed the collar around her neck. It somehow stuck in my mind, and I was very happy to make the connection that this was actually one of Adrian's Egyptian collar designs from 1944, which she's wearing at a family reunion. And here is actually a photograph of a version of the dress. I think she had a darker version. And she was also, she wore it to work. I think that's a really nice moment when I realized that from the occupational, unusual occupations video that was made in the 40s, she was featured in her Adrian. Another find was this Adrian suit jacket, which I can't tell from the photograph if it was a suit or just a jacket, but I was also able to make that connection with another museum piece as well. So more Hollywood titans entranced by the glamorous Liebes look followed suit. Another costume designer, Travis Banton, in 1946, generated buzz for Universal Pictures and for a product called Lurex, which was a new yarn that Liebes had just been engaged to promote. He created a sensational emerald, gold, and black swing jacket for Lucille Ball's on-screen attire in William Sider's Lover Come Back. Not a movie I can actually recommend. It's not very good, but this jacket is. So this was actually Banton's second use of the Liebes fabric. Earlier in 46, Merle Oberon, the actress, was slated to wear a very similar Banton coat for Vogue, but it mysteriously disappeared after the actress borrowed it the night before the photo shoot. So we actually have accounts in the Liebes papers that an account executive at the ad company, which coordinated the Vogue deal, was obliged to report back to Liebes that, quote, "The coat has never been seen since, and Miss Oberon refuses to talk about it. It sounds unbelievable, but it is true." So if you ever find that, Jackie, you let me know. So Edith Head, the arbiter of Paramount Pictures costume design, also looked to Liebes's looms for 2 scales of gold rush gingham, a blonde cotton that was glistening with gold, copper, and silver metallic yarns. But of everything that she ever did, I feel that her most transformative contribution to fashion was with her work in Lurex. She did style prints and apparel, prints for apparel, and provided color consulting and research and development, as she did for Jansen Mills, Jansen Knitting Mills, beginning in 1947. But that's the thing. She was more than just fashion. She was also a huge color forecaster and somebody who would set palettes for industry. But she was also revolutionizing the materials in fashion while she was injecting her own brand of color, from pastel colors to jet black. And in 1946, the yarn division of the Dobekman Company, manufacturers of cellophane, hired Liebes as a brand ambassador for this brand new fashion-forward plastic laminated aluminum thread. That's what Lurex is. And her contractual objective was to explore the technical properties of the material, devise color palettes, and actively participate in the publicity and marketing efforts. And she performed these tasks with fervor. This is a view of one of my favorite rooms in the exhibition that was held a couple years ago. It was the Lurex room, and everything in it revolved around the promotion and the marketing of this material. So with Lurex's fashion angle, she was able to dovetail the duties that she had for Dobekman with several of her other non-competitive consulting engagements. So she started putting Lurex into this non-tarnishing, pliable miracle yarn into her own work for fashion fabrics, like the elusive Banton Oberon jacket was originally sent to Vogue to promote Lurex on Dobekman's behalf. She prioritized making the Lurex name, in her own words, a must for all fashion writers. And another mission was to buck the notion that metallic fashions were seasonal or formal, which was an effort that was applauded by fashion purveyors like Harper's Bazaar, who proclaimed, quote, "This winter you may go out in the rain in a raincoat spun from the threads of golden metal, and when summer comes, you may swim in a gilded maillot," end quote. This prediction was a reference to a dandy's raincoat of white boucle shot with gold that was by Adele Simpson, and a Rosemary Reed strapless gold lame swimsuit, both made with fabrics produced at Liebes's looms. And yes, that is Rita Hayworth in a publicity promotional for Down to Earth. And she was wearing it for the publicity photos. The immediate allure of washable, tarnish-proof metallics for outerwear and beachwear increased as sportswear companies, including Cole of California and Jansen, both of which Liebes worked for, marketed sparkling high-style swimsuits and sweaters. And through her own designs for apparel and accessory fabrics, and those translated for mechanized production by Goodall Fabrics, another Liebes client, she was well on her way to making sparkle a year-round and, in fact, global fascination. By the end of the 40s and into the 50s, Liebes's name was associated with a multitude of accessories, footwear for Joyce, Capezio, and J.J. Slater, handbags for Rosenfeld and Koblenz, printed handkerchiefs and fringed wool scarves, spiked with glitter, just to name a few. But she was, I mean, as much as she got praise for color, she was most often hailed as a glimmer proselytizer. So when Liebes joined Janssen in 1947, she was named fabric fashion consultant and colorist. This allowed her to dabble in knitwear and print design while forecasting color trends, all with the capable backing of Janssen's sportswear designer and California designer Luella Ballerino. She was able to express some of her own fashion preferences, sharing tips such as swimsuit colors should bear a relationship to skin tones and not the surrounding you're dressing for. And emphasizing a harmonious mix and match in colors and for sun clothes so that they could be combined across ensembles, sort of intuitively knowing how women choreographed their own wardrobes. Advertisements for striped t-shirts and satin swimwear and shorts, and cashmere sweaters in her confectionery tones of lemon tint, seafoam, Rio red, and tangerine emphasized her color authority. Darren Pierce, a Liebes employee who was keenly interested in fashion, also served as an envoy for her at Janssen's plant in Oregon. And he also designed under the name Mr. Darren and came into Liebes's orbit by walking into her Sutter Street studio and presenting a range of stylized fashion sketches, specifically incorporating her fabrics. And when she met him, it was over. He became an employee almost immediately, and his letters back from Janssen, which you see one on the right, are just absolutely hilarious, and they're filled with a lot of accounts of resistance to certain Liebes Look colors or wariness of her choices in knitting yarns. And because I absolutely can't resist showing you a few more femme fatale cupies. Here's a few more from FIT Special Collections, and one of them actually has a Liebes fabric still attached to it, which is really very nice. Pierce also had a hand in one of the best Liebes fashion items of all time, a festive hostess apron that was featured on the cover of House and Garden's February 1950 issue. While Pierce was credited by name in many sources, the apron and the accompanying black après-ski or patio slacks outfit are often identified as the work of designer Claire Potter, who was also a friend of Liebes's and for whom she had done her designer showroom. She may have collaborated with Pierce on these pieces for her own line, but there's no doubt that Liebes connected Pierce to Potter to create this accessory. And as we'll see, Liebes just had a knack for connecting friends with other friends, and her fashion friendships were numerous. None of these were so close as her relationship with Bonnie Cashin, and they were compatible from the start and with similar design aspirations and ethos. Liebes first encountered Cashin in Los Angeles when Cashin was head costume designer for 20th Century Fox Film Corporation. On set, Cashin spied a Liebes fabric on a chair seat and insisted on finding more to make it a coat out of. And by the time Cashin relocated to New York in 1949 to pursue fashion, she and Liebes were very close. They overlapped in the Do Beckman. The thread of the story is lurex, ad campaign juggernaut in 1954. And then again, they collaborated in 1956 for their most sensational collaboration, Skirtings, Inc. Conceived of as collector's items, these lengthy hostess skirts, each accentuating a custom woven Liebes fabric, were designed by Cashin starting in 1956. The skirts were featured in Vogue and were admired for their svelteness, their lush textures, and their shimmer. Cashin's 1958 skirts line, Skirtings Inc. line, featured a checkered mohair fabric that's shot through with lurex, and it came in a jumble of greens and blues or all dazzling reds with pinks. You're seeing the reds with pinks on the right side here. So this fuzzy material was overlapped in a slim, unrestricted wrap style skirt or tapered mid-calf variation that would appear as effortless as a blanket gathered around the hips and minimally shaped at the waistline with fringe cascading down the center front seam. And it's absolutely a style which maximizes the effect of Liebes's fabric and respects it as well. It's not something that Cashin needed to cut into to shape it. It was infamously worn by the burlesque legend and Cashin client, Gypsy Rose Lee, who you see on the left. She was rumored to have taken out something out of her garter from underneath that skirt at a party one night as well. So the pairing of this fabric, which was also used by Cashin for ponchos, we'll see, with the elegantly casual silhouette, it just demonstrates the synergy between these women and the way that they were both centered around lifestyle, and they just sort of ingeniously anticipated the direction of fashion. And the other rumor I heard about this skirt was that it was possibly altered so that it would actually be more of a easy tearaway for a striptease. They traveled together frequently and shared a passion for art, going up and down Madison Avenue every Saturday to visit museums and galleries together. And the core of their aesthetic connection hinged on a heightened understanding of color and texture. They gravitated towards clear, saturated hues, sometimes more neutrally quiet ones. And the skirtings palette ranged from subtle and black mingled with silver and white to others that were more like described in the press as sour green, morning glory, and poppy. This is just actually one of my favorite finds when you can put together a design from Bonnie's sketches with a sample that's, for example, in the Cooper Hewitt Museum, and see that there's just these ways that you can layer on information onto other objects in museums now. Another view of the Cooper Hewitt exhibition, which features several fashions, some from the Bonnie Cashin, several Bonnie Cashin fashions, some from the Stephanie Lake collection of Bonnie Cashin, and some from the Fidham Museum. So Cashin's signature hues like petunia pink and bright orange were analogous to Liebes's favorite magenta and curry tones. And Cashin's sketches for her Resort 64 line show her choice of a Liebes plaid for skirts, wild topper tunics, and bags. And this was actually described as an upholstery material. And it's a great way for me to show you an example of what really can be worn on the body that can upholster a chair. What are the differences? What are the similarities? Often it's only in how we categorize them. This would be wonderful on a couch. It's also wonderful as a jacket. And I think Liebes was very instrumental in opening up people's ideas to the potential of fashion fabrics. I mean, obviously, anything that she wove with bamboo in it was probably the one thing that you couldn't wear on your body unless maybe some some unusual fashion students can show us a way to do that. But this is an upholstery fabric that Cashin used and didn't bother her once that it was supposed to be on a drape. In fact, there was a time when she described a fabric that was sheer that she used for a dress that was actually a casement fabric, that a Liebes casement fabric. And she said, well, if it's good enough to screen a window, it's certainly good enough to screen a body. So we see this this upholstery material. She also described it as non-regimental stripes and very certified checks. It's a bit of the Bonnie Cashin humor. This was also called the melon and mimosa colorway. So here's that poncho again. It's made from the same material as Gypsy Rose Lee's skirt. And Cashin also used Liebes's fabrics for her personal wardrobe items as well. And these pieces right here, this sort of sunset striped tunic and mini dress, or tunic or mini dress. I think it's more likely a tunic than a mini dress. And this futuristic bonnet ensemble or something that Cashin kept. And also this bag hat that was whipped together from like a piece of glittery fuchsia and violet emerald striped wool. Another special piece that got lent to the Cooper Hewitt exhibition is this shawl that Liebes wove for her friend with a Mr. Darren sketch. This plush powder pink stole with fringe. And this is one of the examples where Liebes wove in strips of sequins, so they kind of glitter in the light. So Cashin wore Liebes, and in turn, Liebes wore Cashin. A lot of them were made with studio woven fabrics, but also with Jasco, power loomed woolens that were adored by Cashin and mostly designed by Liebes. That was another area of Liebes's specialty, was bringing the hand-loomed look, making the hand-loom look for less, so that it would be translated to power looms, and so brought down to a price point that was more affordable without sacrificing the look. So Liebes connected with Jasco Fabrics in 1963 through Philip Sills, who was Cashin's manufacturing partner. And from the start, they were off. She was sending sampler blankets to demonstrate the feasibility of achieving different pattern effects on a single warp, thereby economizing production costs. And she was eager to do great things for Jasco and committed to delivering her brand of design excellence to the apparel fabrics field. She actually said this to them. And you can see just from this small sampling what a range of ideas and textures and colors that she brought to the fashion landscape. And obviously, Bonnie was delighted to use so many of them. And ever the cross promoter, she suggested it would also be worth Jasco's while to use the fiber Orlon in their weaves. And it was a new acrylic fiber that she said, if you use it, it would merit valuable publicity by DuPont, which was Orlon's manufacturer, and yet another of Liebes's knitwear and fashion industry clients. Her knowledge of DuPont's plan for synthetic fabric fashions at the 1964 World's Fair in New York interlocked with her artistic motivations concerning Jasco and resulted in high fashion looks from designers including Pauline Trigère and Petullo Joe Copeland, all made with wool that was blended with DuPont's laboratory fibers in weaves designed by Liebes. From the moment Liebes was retained by DuPont in 55 for her expertise, she experimented in ways that came very naturally to her, but fit with the company's textile fiber department goals of broader promotion of man-made fibers. And this is one of my favorite things. Didn't make it into the exhibition or the book, but her knit ideas for Orlon and Antron just gives you sort of an idea of what her Midtown Manhattan workshop could produce. And then these were displays that she created for DuPont sales offices that she would ship also to conventions and trade shows, where if she was actually attending them, she personally arranged them in the most effective order. So definitely pages from glossy fashion reporting, she saved them so proudly in her amazing scrapbooks, which document that plurality of the connections that she maintained for nearly 30 years. And she really truly did touch nearly every aspect of fashion development in her time, maneuvering between corporate contracts and definitely meshing client objectives when they overlapped. So I mentioned her personal style. I'll just kind of go through this real quick. It's kind of fun, little spice on top. She channeled her innate grasp of fashion principles not only into her professional affairs, but also into her own brand of chic. She was always lauded for her taste in clothing, her stature, her colorful attire. She wore pieces by leading American designers to satisfy her practical streak. And it's interesting to note that she vehemently disliked Christian Dior, but appreciated the whimsy and artisanship of the haute couture from masters like Cristobal Balenciaga. Signatures of her personal Liebes look included the coiled coiffure crowned by a blonde pompadour and often topped with a custom roll hat by her friend, Mr. John. And I'll note that that fabric is Aditi and Leslie Tillett fabric. She wore statement coats, streamlined suits, simple shifts, and always crisp Chinese style smocks for her studio work. She gave wardrobe advice, and in fact, suggesting the formula of a light, a bright, and a dark, of combination of hues for the most flattering look in an ensemble and for the ease of coordination. And I think that's very well demonstrated in this Claire Potter dress that she's wearing on the left. And Claire was a friend of hers. She based most of her professional attire on black, actually, as a non-competing foil to her own vibrant prints and bright blouses. Some days I wonder if that bright pink and black stripe might be a Schiaparelli, because that was a color she was very well known for. Seems to connect with her taste as well. And June Groff is actually somebody that designed the fabric that she was wearing in this blouse, but she was also somebody that probably was connected to Claire Potter through Dorothy Liebes, and also later to Jacqueline or Larson, who took this design and titled it Spice Garden and released it at a later date. They were all friends. So with this supreme fearlessness, Liebes frequently paired her fabrics with accessories in oddball colors, like a purple and hot pink check with orange shoes to match the third color vibration that she sensed emanated from the pattern. And this photo always kills me because I just wonder which color combination she's wearing here. So to end, I'm going to end on the one Bonnie Cashin object that makes it's so much more special than all of the others, and I'll tell you why. So, to punctuate her life's work with an appropriately fashionable exclamation point, she donned this Cashin cape that was in her personal collection to the opening of her career retrospective, which was held in spring of 1970 at the Museum of Contemporary Crafts in New York. And of course, the cape's material was one of her own design, a graphic double weave power loomed in the United Kingdom by Otterburn Limited and also illustrated in the exhibition catalog. This is actually a photo of her wearing the cape at the exhibition with a note from Cashin. And, you know, we don't know what became of most of Liebes's personal wardrobe, although she did ask Cashin to assist in dispersing her prized garments and travel keepsakes to family members and friends. And the family does still hold a few pieces. Luckily, her archived papers, and in particular, her fascinating scrapbooks, retain rich details about her appetite for style and document her essential role as a mid-century fashion alchemist, pushing her heady blend of color, luminosity, and tactility to the forefront. So thank you so much, and I'd be happy to take some questions now if you have any.
That was wonderful, Leigh. Thank you so much. As a child of
Oh,
as a child of the 80s, I had no idea that all those metallic thread blouses I wore that were very on trend probably have a debt to Dorothy Liebes, right?
yes, indeed,
And
exactly.
you do see
It's
nowadays
true.
as well, making
Yeah,
a comeback. We do have some questions here, and
great.
I'll start out with a question from Kieran. She says, I don't know a lot about either Dorothy Liebes or Annie Albers, but their use of metals makes me wonder if the two women ever connected or thought things about each other.
Ooh,
Any thoughts?
they were, there was absolutely a knowledge and respect. Um, since I focused so specifically on certain aspects of her enormous professional circle, I don't feel the best informed to tell you more about her potential relationship with Annie Albers. But certainly, she had a lot of relationships with people who were working at Cranbrook. So they certainly knew of each other and were using similar materials as well.
Thank you. Oh, here's an interesting one. I heard that the metal thread in Frank Lloyd Wright's curtains in the Unitarian Meeting House in Madison, Wisconsin, was from Brillo pads as a cost-saving measure. Fact?
I would say no. I think legend. It sounds like legend. I'm just even thinking about the impracticality of trying to do that. And also with one thing to note about the miracle of Lorax thread, she did use metal strip in some of her early works before the invention of Lorax, because that was essentially the metallic. You could either use metallic strip or a thread that was wrapped around with metallic, making a coil. But metal breaks, it rusts, it oxidizes. So often those effects are dulled over time, or if a metal strip weft gets bent, it breaks. The miracle of Lurex is that that wouldn't happen, and it could come in a multitude of colors as well. So I know that when Wright actually launched his collection of fabrics with Schumacher, there were metallic threads. There was Lurex that was included in that. So I would imagine that it would either be metal strip, metal wrapped thread, or Lurex, but not Brillo pads. But that's a good one. I'm going to remember that.
I should say, because that church is located here in Madison and we may have some locals on the call, if anybody knows a little bit about the weaving that took place at the meeting house, there was a significant group of active weavers in that congregation that textiles. So I'd be curious to know if anybody out there could speak to that. We have another question. Is there a current equivalent of Lurex?
Yes, there is still Lurex.
It's the same?
It's
Has it changed at all?
No, it's not owned by the same company anymore, but Lurex is Silodex, I think is the parent company. But they were acquired in France. So yes, often you will still see metallic threads in our clothes today that are probably Lurex. But that's another thing. It spawned a whole range of laminated metallized threads. So Mylar became also a component in that as well. But there were a lot of competitors and imitators also coming up with their own revolutionary yarns.
Great. And certainly one can go to the local fabric store and find metallic thread for sale. I mean, it's probably
absolutely. And the trick will be to
descendant
yes, and the trick is always to look at the difference of the thread. I mean, the threads that are metallic that are round are threads that have the metal coil around it, or it's often polyester now, it's not even metal anymore. And a flat thread, that's Lurex, because it's basically a sandwich of aluminum in between plastic. And the color comes to Lurex through the adhesive, which is really interesting as well. It's one of my hopes is to get on to do more work with researching and writing about Lurex, because it's pretty fascinating. It directly comes right out of the war as well, World War II.
Here's another question. Any idea whether Wright simply told Liebes what he wanted, colors, patterns, translucence, etc., or whether they ever had a real dialogue and he sought advice from her?
I'm quite sure he sought advice from her. I think there's kind of scant correspondence between them in her papers, but I think that there was a lot of in-person and a lot of phone conversations and things that kept them connected and talking about projects. I think that she admired his sense of color and I mean, everything, I think. And he, in turn, he also admired things so strongly that I think that they respected each other's opinions. But tantalizingly, there are no breadcrumbs that I have found that show orders to the studio. So, but I'm sure that they were close enough that there would be a free exchange of ideas at all times.
Thank you. Now's your chance, folks. If you'd like to ask a question, please go ahead and type it into Q&A. Leigh, I just wonder about whether one can acquire any textiles from Liebes on the market, maybe an auction house or something like that, or are they mostly in collections?
That's a great question. There are every once in a while one of those samples. I showed you a lot of tiny little samples. Well, that was something that they're strike-offs to show clients what they could do, and there's thousands of them. Every once in a while, something like that pops up on the open market, but the custom nature of her work makes it, I mean, her custom work, I should say. Her custom work is very hard to find. Now, I think, and I know that you can find examples of her work in vintage clothing all the time, because there are Bonnie Cashin items. She also contributed things to different companies. So The detail of the Jansen bathing suit was actually, that's in my collection. I was able to identify that was one of hers. So it takes a little bit of connoisseurship to spot it, but you know, if you like vintage fashion, you will find a Bonnie Cashin out there that will be a Liebes fabric. So happy hunting.
There's a remark here that historians doing research, that hate telephones as a way of communicating without the paper trail.
Yeah, I'm working on another project right now where that's been a source of conversation because I feel like there's just huge gaps of communication with people that they were very close with. And it's like, oh, right. They actually were that close. Yeah. So.
Did Liebes know or work with Florence Knoll to your knowledge, or were they from different
They knew each other.
areas or orbits?
I mean, they were definitely, they were colleagues. They were I mean, they had very different objectives in their worlds. Florence Knoll was running her own empire and doing everything in-house. So there wasn't really a lot of reason to reach out to Liebes for material. But they certainly probably had things in the same interiors at some point, with different interior designers as well. But I'm not aware that they were particularly close friends.
Thanks for that.
Pleasure.
Emily, I'll let you get a word in edgewise here. I've been very chatty.
No, I thought it was a wonderful presentation, Leigh. I certainly learned a lot. Those photographs of Liebes with Wright were really fantastic, and I've personally had the pleasure to be able to see some of the work that he had done, or the work that she had done for Wright that we have in our collection. So I feel very fortunate in that, and they're quite stunning with that beautiful metallic thread running through. They're so precious, in fact, that we have them in our vault and not on collection. So if you visit Taliesin West, you won't be able to see them, but perhaps we will do kind of a special presentation about the pieces we have in our collection. It was really great.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to keep sharing information about somebody who's so special to me, Dorothy Liebes.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you,
Thank
Leigh.
you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you bet. And Emily, thanks for being here tonight and for the Foundation's sponsorship of the program. And we also want to nod to our ongoing sponsors, the American Institute of Architects, Wisconsin, who were lovely about promoting this lecture as well. We just hope everybody will come back for a future Wright Design Series talk, which will happen April 24th. Featuring an organization called Defining Humanity. So we do plan to do that both virtually and in person, and there will be some information coming out very soon about that. So thanks so much, everybody, for joining us tonight, and I hope that you took something away from this wonderful person and artist, Dorothy Liebes. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.